Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. My name is Leon Jones. Glad you all came to view this video. I will try to do a live stream next week. Now, let me put it to you bluntly. One of the reasons why I haven't done live streams is because I don't get the audience participation that I want to get. And when it comes to doing any of these live streams and even doing pre-records, it takes a lot of work. Now, I'm not one that asks for cash apps. I just like the participation. Now, my content may not be as entertaining as other content, but it speaks the truth. Again, if you're looking for entertainment, this channel is not the place for you. I don't do entertainment here. I simply do videos based off of real life. And I talk about what's going on out there. And the main theme of my channel is psychology. And I'm going to get into that tonight because we have some behavioral issues right now in the United States. And I'm going to be covering a lot of them. And I'm also working on getting my blog talk radio show back. And I may do it with StreamYards, I may not. I have a call-in number. But what I am going to do in 2023 is I'm going to work really hard on politics. I'm going to work hard on a lot of psychological issues. And of course, education. Now, if you have been viewing my videos previously, I talked about propaganda. I'm also going to get into hypocrisy. Now, all of these issues are important to the average human being. Now, I say that because the average human being is not abreast to history. They don't know anything about civics. When they watch news, they usually watch news that's mainstream. What I do here is not mainstream. Again, the content that I deliver is to help you improve your behavior. Now, of course, in the manosphere sector, there's always talk about the blue pill, the red pill, then you have the black pill. Well, with all those pills comes behavior. And you have to ask yourself, which way do you want to go? Now, tonight, I'm going to talk about the science of cognitive dissonance. The science of cognitive dissonance. Let me share my screen and let's get into it right now. Now, this is from Lumen Introduction to Psychology. Now, if you were my community tab, I told you I was going to do a video on cognitive dissonance. Again, cognitive dissonance. Now, what is cognitive dissonance? Now, without the medical or psychological definition, if you didn't know what it meant, let's think of two cars headed for a collision course. One coming from the right and one coming from the left. Well, why are they going to crash? They're going to crash because they're in conflict with each other. And that's basically what cognitive dissonance is. It's basically issues that are in conflict with one another. It's almost like hypocrisy. But hypocrisy is basically what's good for me is not good for you. That's what hypocrisy is. But you can basically derive hypocrisy from cognitive dissonance. Why? Because you have two conflicting issues. And sometimes those issues don't make sense. See, when somebody is hypocritical, you can look at it this way too. It's my way or the highway. So if somebody's doing something wrong, they don't want you to follow what they're doing, but yet they're doing something wrong. That's hypocrisy. So you're over here trying to do something right and they're doing something wrong. What happens? They cancel each other out. So you can say hypocrisy is a form of cognitive dissonance. Now, when we talk about cognitive dissonance, basically in psychology, it occurs when a person holds contradictory beliefs. Now, is hypocrisy not contradictory? Yes, it is. The left always contradicts the right. It's true. Not only does it contradict beliefs when we deal with cognitive dissonance, but it also occurs when a person holds contradictory values, ideas, and it's typically experienced as psychological stress when they participate in an action that goes against one or more of them. Now, according to the theory, when two actions or ideas are not psychologically consistent with each other, people do in their power, they do whatever they can or within their power to change them until they become consistent. In other words, cognitive dissonance and hypocrisy, they're not very comfortable. In fact, most people are comfortable in their own beliefs, even if they are lies. This is why I always tell you when it comes to Americans, to make you feel good, many of them don't want to deal with the truth. They'd rather deal with the lie. Why? Because when you deal with the lie, it builds up a self-esteem. Now, that self-esteem is basically an artificial self-esteem. And when you deal with the truth is uncomfortable. And when we deal with discomfort, basically discomfort is triggered by the person's belief clashing with new information perceived, wherein they try to find a way to resolve the contradiction to reduce their discomfort. Now, in a theory of cognitive dissonance, Leon Festinger proposed that human beings strive for internal psychological consistency to function mentally in the real world. Now, a person who experiences internal inconsistency tends to become psychologically uncomfortable and is motivated to reduce the cognitive dissonance. What happens is they tend to make changes to justify their stressful behavior, either by adding new parts of the cognition, causing the psychological dissonance or the rationalization, or by avoiding circumstances and contradictory information likely to increase the magnitude of the cognitive dissonance. In other words, you can also call cognitive dissonance a confirmation bias. Like I said, a lot of us are very biased. Why? Because we always conform to what we believe in. This is what happens when you deal with media. You have Fox News, you have CNN. Well, both sides believe what their side is saying without looking at the other side. And what happens? You have two sides that collide. That's cognitive dissonance because both sides are either lying to each other or they're telling each other what they want to hear so they can feel good. But when it comes to any type of debate, debates are basically two different views that are clashing with one another. Yes, debates are filled with cognitive dissonance because when you have two people that have conflicting views, which one is right? Could be that both parties are right. Both parties could be wrong. Now, to justify the confirmation of who's right is going to be based off of the material. Now, you have to be careful with sources that you are looking at as well, because sources tend to be biased as well. You have individuals that say, well, individuals don't read. Well, who writes all of the history books? What's in the history books? You look at the Bible. I know individuals say the Bible was written by men, but there are books that didn't get into the Bible. But I tell you what, the Bible is a history book. But if you look at the Bible, whoever wrote the Bible predicted something very, very good with what's going on here in the 21st century. You have a lot of demonism here in the 21st century. And you have individuals who poke fun at the Bible. Some have turned into witchcraft and tarot cards. But let's move on. So, when it comes to research, well, later research documents that only conflicting cognitions that threaten any individual's positive self-image. What does that do? That causes dissonance. Now, additional research found that dissonance is not only psychologically uncomfortable, but also can cause psychological arousal, and it activates regions of the brain important to emotions and cognitive functioning. Now, when I talk about cognitive dissonance, just like I was talking about the debate, you have to weigh in on your evidence. And whoever has the best evidence, for the most part, is going to be right. That's based on evidence. Now, again, opinions. Let me talk about that as well. People can tell you, well, that's my opinion, that's my truth. Well, you don't own the truth. The truth is the truth. What you're basing anything off of is your popular belief. But where are you getting your beliefs from? Your beliefs are coming from your experience. This is why I always interact with people in the conversation, is how I interact with people in the conversation. If I'm going to have a view that's different, well, don't prove your case to me by your own experience. Gather some trending data, because everybody wants themselves to be the exception to the rule. Well, for the most part, you may be an exception to the rule in some cases, but on other cases, you may be the rule. But the problem is, you've already told yourself that you are the exception to the rule. But in the real world, no unicorns exist. Now, a classic example of cognitive dissonance is John, a 20-year-old who enlists in the military. During boot camp, he's awakened at 5 a.m. And when you're awakened at 5 a.m., the sun, it is very early. Now, when it comes to John during boot camp, he's awakened at 5 a.m. is basically he's chronically sleep deprived. In other words, he has sleep deprivation. He doesn't like to be yelled at. And when you are in the military, sometimes you're going to be in some areas that are uncomfortable. You're going to be covered in sand flea bites, especially if you go into the Marine Corps down in Parris Island, South Carolina. And in the military, I've been in the military, and you're going to be bitten by mosquitoes. You're going to be bruised. You could be battered. You're going to be mentally exhausted, and it can get worse. Now, again, when it comes to the military, recruits that make it to week 11 of boot camp have to do 54 hours of continuous training. Well, no matter how long you're in boot camp, your training is continuous. Now, in boot camp, and it's not a surprise, no matter if it's John or matter if it's me, Leon, no one likes to be miserable. In this type of situation, people can change their beliefs, their attitudes, or their behaviors. So the last option, a change of behaviors, is not available to John. He signed onto the military for 4 years, and he cannot legally leave. Well, that is true. But if he leaves, he's going to be UA or AWOL. And that's subjected to restriction to the barracks or the ship, or depending on how long you're gone. I know when I was in the Navy, somebody had gone UA for 2 years. They put them in a brig and they had to make that 2 years up because they did sign the contract. Now, getting back to the example of cognitive dissonance, talking about John who enlisted in the military. Now, if John keeps thinking about how miserable he is, it's going to be a very long 4 years. He will be in a constant state of cognitive dissonance. So, as an alternative to this misery, John can change his beliefs or attitudes by telling himself, I am becoming stronger, healthier, and sharper. I am learning discipline and how to defend myself in my country. What I'm doing is very important. If this is his belief, he will realize that he is becoming stronger through his challenges. He will then feel better and not experience cognitive dissonance, which is an uncomfortable state. Now, when we deal with cognitive dissonance, there's also a magnitude of dissonance. Now, the term magnitude of dissonance refers to the level of comfort, correction, that's a level of discomfort caused to the person. Now, this can be caused by the relationship between two differing internal beliefs or an action that is incapable with the beliefs of the person. And you know what else you can throw in with cognitive dissonance and magnitude of dissonance? You can throw delusion, because a lot of people might say something, but do they really believe it? So also throw hypocrisy in there as well. Well, when it comes to magnitude of dissonance, two factors determine the degree of psychological dissonance caused by two conflicting cognitions or by two conflicting actions. Number one, the importance of the cognitions. The greater the personal value of the elements, the greater the magnitude of the dissonance in the relation. Now, when the value of the importance of the two dissonant items is high, it is difficult to determine which action or thought is correct. Both have had a place of truth, at least subjectively, in the mind of the person. So therefore, when the ideas, or let's say the ideals or actions now basically clash, this is what I told you before, cognitive dissonance, two conflicting views that are clashing. So when the ideals or actions now clash, it is difficult for the individual to decide which takes priority. Then you have number two, the ratio of cognitions, which is the proportion of dissonant to consonant elements. It's the dissonant to consonant elements. Well, there is a level of discomfort within each person that is acceptable for living. Now, what I mean by this is acceptable for living. Let's take not making enough money. Well, that's acceptable to get you by, but it is discomforting. Why? Because you got to work harder to make up what you don't have. And some people may go through dishonest behaviors to survive. And survival can be discomfort. Why? Because if you were out there where there were no grocery stores, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to live off the wild. Now, if somebody is bougie and they come from the city, and let's say there's a natural disaster that occurs like a hurricane, and the grocery stores are wiped out, but an individual has to live. What are they going to have to do? They're going to have to consume animals or insects that they wouldn't normally consume. So it's going to be discomforting because if you don't know how to kill the animal, what's going to happen to you? So either you kill that animal or you die. And sometimes when you're in that moment of survival, your adrenaline takes place, and that's going to help you make the right decision, although you may not want to make that decision. Now, again, I'm just giving you an example of levels of discomfort when it comes to each person that's acceptable for living. The best one is not making enough money because most of us live from payday to payday. When it comes to not having enough money, it's very discomforting to have to work one job, but you're working 2 and 3 jobs, especially when wages are down. The more work you have to do in order to live a or maintain a comfortable lifestyle. But you're going to have to do something discomforting to live. Again, when it comes to the rational of cognitions, there is a level of discomfort within each person that is acceptable for living. Again, there is a level of discomfort within each person that is acceptable for living. So, when a person is within that comfort level, the dissonant factors do not interfere with functioning. However, with dissonant factors, they're abundant and not enough in line with each other. One goes through a process to regulate and bring the ratio back to an acceptable level. Now, once a subject chooses to keep one of the dissonant factors, they quickly forget the other to restore a peace of mind. Now, there is always some degree of dissonance when a person or within a person. Let me go back. There's also always, let's use the word always. There's always some degree of dissonance within a person as they go about making decisions. Again, there is always some degree of dissonance within a person as they go about making decisions due to the changing quantity and quality of knowledge and wisdom that they gain. Now, the magnitude itself is a subjective measurement since the reports are self-relayed, and there is no objective way as yet to get a clear measurement of the level of discomfort. Now, when we deal with cognitive dissonance, there are types, and there are 5 primary types of cognitive dissonance. There's post-decisional dissonance, dissonance from wanting something we can't have, dissonance due to inconsistency between attitude and behavior, dissonance due to inadequate justification, and dissonance due to inconsistency between commitment and information. So people invested in a given perspective shall, when confronted with contrary evidence, expend great effort to justify retaining the challenged perspective. Now, when we get into post-decisional dissonance, that basically occurs after making a decision that is irrevocable or irrevocable. So post-decisional dissonance occurs after making a decision that is irrevocable or that would be very difficult to reverse. This type of cognitive dissonance occurs when a person faced with a difficult decision, when there always exist aspects of the rejected object that appeal to the chooser. So the action of deciding provokes the psychological dissonance consequent to choosing X instead of Y, despite the little difference between X and Y. The decision I choose X is dissonant with the cognition that there are some aspects of Y that I like. The studied choice induced preferences in the absence of choice, evidence from a blind two-choice paradigm with young children, and Capuchin monkeys report similar results in the occurrence of cognitive dissonance in human beings and in animals. Now, we get into our next type of cognitive dissonance, and that's dissonance that results from wanting something we can't have. This is why you hear me at the end of all of my videos say, be blessed with what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have, because many of us are basically chasing something that we can't have. or we're not in the position to get it right now. And if we try to get it, we're going to make some impulsive decisions to get it. And what's going to happen? We end up losing what we have sometimes. So when we deal with dissonance from wanting something we can't have, that results from wanting that results from basically it could be material. A lot of us want material items we can't have. So with dissonance that results from something we can't have, there are things we would like to have that we cannot for a number of reasons. When the desired something is very important, we may have dissonant cognitions that make us tense and unhappy. So, in the effect of the severity of threat on the evaluation of forbidden behavior, in the effect of the severity, in the effect of the severity, correction, in the effect of the severity of threat on the evaluation of forbidden behavior, children were left in a room with toys, including a greatly desirable steam shovel, the forbidden toy. Upon leaving the room, the experimenter told half of the children that there would be severe punishment if they played with the steam shovel toy. The other half of the children were told that there would only be a mild consequence for playing with the forbidden toy. All of the children refrained from playing with the forbidden toy. Later, when the children were told that they could freely play with any toy they wanted, the children in the mild punishment group were less likely to play with the steam shovel, which was the forbidden toy, even though they knew that they would no longer receive a punishment. Now, the children had made a choice whether to play with the toy that they really wanted and face punishment or ignore their desire for the toy. So, for the children threatened with severe punishment, the choice was easy. Do not play with the toy. Their desire for the toy was great, but the risk of severe punishment was not worth it. However, for the mild punishment children, it was a more difficult decision. Their desire for the toy was great, and their concern for the mild punishment was small. While they also chose not to play with the toy, they may have needed to justify to themselves why they did not play with the forbidden toy. So the degree of punishment was insufficiently strong to resolve their cognitive dissonance. So the children had to convince themselves that playing with the forbidden toy was not worth the effort. Again, this is where you come down to the old adage, you pick your battles, because some battles aren't worth fighting, because you may not have the time, the energy, or the resources to win. This is why when you use the old sign language, shame, insult, guilt, need to be right. Shout out to the late Kevin Samuels for bringing that acronym to the forefront. Well, you expend a lot of energy by trying to be right. Because what happens, you end up looking like a fool because you're going to end up deflecting. You're going to get emotionally outraged. You're going to have a lot of delusion. You're going to lie to yourself to try to convince yourself that you're right, even though you're not right. Now, when it comes to dissonance, there's dissonance as a result of inconsistencies of attitude and behavior. So, when it comes to dissonance as a result of inconsistencies of attitudes and behaviors, that occurs when there are discrepancies between what we believe and what we do. So basically, this discrepancy makes us uncomfortable and stressed. So, in the cognitive consequences of forced compliance, the investigators asked students to spend an hour doing tedious tasks. Example, turning pegs a quarter turn at fixed intervals. Now, the tasks were designed to induce a strong negative mental attitude in the subjects. So basically, once the subjects had done the task, the experimenters asked some of the subjects to speak with another new subject about the task. So, unknown to the subjects, This new subject was actually Confederate or an actor and part of the research team. So the subjects were directed to persuade the Confederate that the tedious tasks were interesting and engaging. So subjects of one group were paid $20 for their participation. Again, one group was paid $20 for their participation. Those in the second group were only paid $1. The third group, the control group, was not asked to speak about the Confederate. So at the conclusion of the study, subjects were asked to rate the tedious task. The subjects paid $1. Again, the subjects that paid $1 rated the task more positively than did the subjects in the $20 or control groups. Why? Because the responses of the paid subjects were evidence of cognitive dissonance. See, the subjects in the paid groups experienced dissonance due to inconsistencies between their attitudes and behavior. The subjects believed the task to be boring, but they told the Confederate that the tasks were interesting. Again, what happened? They lied to themselves. And see what happened? They ended up with a conflicting view. They said the tasks were interesting, but they were really boring. That's an example of cognitive dissonance. Now, again, when it came to the $1 group, they rated the task positively, while the $20 group again rated the task negatively. Now, why did the $20 group relate their task negatively? Well, the $20 group had external justification for their inconsistency. Why? Because, and I made this mistake myself, and this is a true story. When I was at PennDOT, I was in a civil engineering training program. And you know what I did? You know what I let motivated me? I let money motivate me into going into an area that I didn't want to go into. So that was cognitive dissonance on my part. So when it came to the $20 group, well, their inconsistency rather, because they were paid $20 to do this experiment, and they had an external justification for what made them inconsistent. Well, money basically motivated them to lie to the Confederate about the task being interesting, when in actuality, it was boring. So receiving only $1 did not seem to justify lying to the Confederate, and compelled subjects in the $1 group to internalize the interesting task. Mental attitude. So basically, the subjects convinced themselves that the tasks were somewhat interesting to rectify the dissonance due to inconsistency between believing the tasks were boring but telling someone the tasks were interesting. So this moves to the next type of cognitive dissonance, and we're going to deal with dissonance due to inadequate justification. So when you have that type of dissonance, talk about dissonance due to inadequate justification, that occurs when we invest a significant amount of time, energy, money, or effort, but we receive little or nothing in return on investment. Let me give you an example. You hear it in Black YouTube all the time, dating. You always hear the brothers talk about women. And they have a lot to say about the women. Why? Because they invest a lot of time, energy, money, and effort, and the women aren't giving them anything back. There's no reciprocity. Why? Because the women in their mind think they're the prize and you should work for them. So as a man, what you're doing, you're wasting time. All that effort you put into trying to get this particular woman, it was all for naught. And guess what happened? You got no ROI, no return on investment. Again, you got no return on investment. You got a lot of smoke blowing up your ass. That's what happened. And you end up feeling a certain way. Well, you feel a certain way, not because of the person, it's because of all that bullshit that you put in the person that you didn't get, that you got back. You got the bullshit back, but you lost your resources. Your feelings got hurt. That's cognitive dissonance due to inadequate justification. If you don't get a return on investment with anything that you do, don't invest in it. See, what I'm teaching you is common sense. Now, many of us will feel as if the effort was a waste of time, that we cheated ourselves out of something. Well, this is going to be cognitive dissonance as well. This is going to be a positive cognitive dissonance. On one hand, you did waste time, but on the other hand, it was a learning experience. Why? Because from the experience of receiving nothing, when you expected something, you're going to realize next time that before you invest something into somebody, don't make them a priority if they're going to make you an option. And that's based off of their actions. Let's continue. In the effect of severity of initiation on liking for a group, to qualify for admission to listen in on a discussion, two groups of people underwent an embarrassing initiation of very psychological severity. Now, the strong initiation group of subjects were to read aloud 12 sexual words considered obscene. The mild initiation group of subjects were to read aloud 12 sexual words not considered obscene. So after reading the list of words, participants were given headphones. Again, participants were given headphones to listen in on an animal sexuality discussion that they were told was occurring in the next room. However, in reality, they were listening to a recorded discussion about animal sexual behavior, which the researchers designed to be dull and banal. So basically, after listening in on the discussion, subjects were asked to evaluate how interesting they found it. So the subjects whose strong initiation required reading aloud obscene words evaluated the discussion as more interesting than the subjects of the mild initiation group. Now, the reading of obscene sexual words to be initiated to the discussion involved a greater investment by the subjects than reading non-obscene words. So, listening to a dull discussion was not worth the embarrassment of reading the obscene words, resulting in cognitive dissonance. Now, the strong initiation subjects convinced themselves that the discussion was more interesting than it actually was to make their effort to feel worthwhile. Now, the mild initiation group did not invest as much to listen to the discussion. So basically, when they found it to be boring, they did not feel cheated. Now, another form of cognitive dissonance, as we look at what cognitive dissonance really is. Again, I told you at the top of this video that it's basically conflicting or contradictory views and beliefs and truths. Well, there is the truth. There's no such thing as your truth, my truth. There's no such thing as your facts and my facts. That's made from a delusional person that wants to be right. And again, shaming, insulting, guilt, and need to be right, that's all cognitive dissonance. Because again, you're going to waste a significant amount of time, energy, money, and effort trying to be right. You're not going to convince anybody because you don't have the proper facts. And This is, you might as well use cognitive dissonance for simps too. Simps trying to convince a woman to validate them. Simps are telling women what the woman wants to hear. Well, she'll take his resources, but she's not going to return anything to him. But simps lie to themselves. This is your blue pillars out there have a lot of cognitive dissonance. They really think that they're going to change some of these women out here. They're not. These simps have cognitive dissonance. And as we get to our next topic on cognitive dissonance, that has to do with inconsistency between commitment and information. And basically that occurs when we commit to a belief, value, or ideal before having all of the information or new information that contradicts the commitment we have made to a belief. The contradiction in belief creates tension. This is where you get stubborn people. You ever heard of that old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Well, when that old dog is useless, you throw him out. That's because individuals have had a belief that they've learned somewhere. They have not received the proper information on it. And when new information comes out, they don't want to hear it. This is why when you bring up statistics to some people, real statistics, they'll tell you they don't like the numbers. Why? Because the numbers, that's part of new information that comes out. It refutes their belief and value that they had gotten from somewhere else, and they've been riding on that all their lives. So when their values have been proven wrong, that creates tension, emotion. This is very easy to figure out. Now, the belief contradiction presented and when prophecy fails, reported that faith deepened among the members of an apocalyptic religious cult, despite the failed prophecy of an alien spacecraft soon to land on Earth to rescue them from earthly corruption. They believed that they would only survive planetary destruction. So they only believed that they would survive planetary destruction. So at the determined place and time, the cult assembled to await their rescue, yet the spaceship never arrived. The confounded prophecy caused them cognitive dissonance. In other words, they believed in something that wasn't going to happen. So they committed to a belief and a prophecy, but new information, the aliens are not coming, caused them to question their commitment. Had they been victims of a hoax, or had they vainly donated away their material possessions to resolve dissonance between their apocalyptic belief and reality that aliens weren't coming to save them? So most of the cult chose to believe that the aliens had given planet Earth a second chance at existence, which in turn empowered them to redirect their religious cult, environmentalism, and social advocacy to end human damage to planet Earth. Again, you have a number of individuals who are in politics, they have cognitive dissonance because they come up with, instead of global warming, they change it to climate change. It's the same thing. So they're trying to get people who are against climate change to believe them. So what do? They use sign language, shame, insult, guilt, need to be right. And this is what the left is very good for. They love to play the race card. They love to play the sexual orientation card. They love to play the gender card, identity politics. That's sign language. and they use that to silence the other side. This is why some speech is silenced. This is when you come up with the cancel culture, because you have one side saying something and it's being refuted by the other side. So the other side cannot refute what one side is saying. So what happens? The cowardness comes out as well. So they cancel the other side. This is why you had a number of conservative talking points canceled from Twitter. Now, again, I'm showing you where cognitive dissonance is abundant, and some of us do it and we're not sure we're doing it. Take a look at tonight's video. You're going to understand it clearly because I'm giving you examples as I take the article and I talk about it. Let me move on, because there are efforts to reduce cognitive dissonance. And here's how you can do it. Well, cognitive dissonance theory proposes that people seek psychological consistency between their expectations of life and existential reality of the world. Now, to function by the expectation of existential consistency, people continually reduce their cognitive dissonance in order to align their cognitions. Now, a cognition is a perception of the world with their actions. Again, if you don't know what a cognition is, that is a perception of the world. So, people align their cognitions or perceptions of the world with their actions. So, what we can do when it comes to cognitive dissonance, we can reduce cognitive dissonance by bringing our cognitions, attitudes, and behaviors in line. That is, making each of them harmonious. In other words, we just balance everything out. Now, again, balance can also be a form of cognitive dissonance. Well, actually, balance is not, because basically balance is almost compromised. Because if I have, and I'm going to use a physics term here, if I have a seesaw and in the middle I have a fulcrum, well, if I put the fulcrum away from the middle, the side with more weight is always going to go down. But if I put that fulcrum in the middle, it's going to be balanced. Now, what did I just do? I had to compromise some space. So I had to take some space away from the side that was down, and I had to add some space to the side that was up. And what did I do? I adjusted the fulcrum and I put it right in the middle, and there you have balance. I compromised something. So again, we can reduce cognitive dissonance by bringing our cognitions, attitudes, and behaviors in line to make them harmonious. Now, the creation and establishment of psychological consistency allow the person afflicted with cognitive dissonance to lessen mental stress by actions that reduce the magnitude of the dissonance. So basically, in practice, people reduce the magnitude of their cognitive dissonance in 4 ways. Number 1, got to change your attitude or belief that is causing the dissonance. Number 2, got to change the behavior that is causing the dissonance. I'll eat no more of this donut. That's an example. Number 3, deny the evidence, ignore, disbelieve, or discredit the evidence that is causing the dissonance. Again, the donut is not a high sugar food. Number 4, the rationalization, making excuses for defending, or justifying what is causing the dissonance. I'm allowed to cheat my diet every once in a while. Now, let's look at the flow chart here as I show you how this works. Now, as we start here, Smoking is bad for your health. Now, in the middle, you have your cognitive dissonance. Now, what you have here, these are your decision boxes. So, which way are you going to go? You already know that smoking is bad. So, when smoking is bad and you've smoked for a while, what are you? You are a smoker. So, what are you trying to do? You're trying to remove the dissonance tension. So, you have to tell yourself these two things. This is where you're going to get the dissonance. Okay, smoking is bad for your health, or is the research inconclusive? This is where you have to make a decision. Now, if you know smoking is bad for your health, what are you going to do? Because there are two options once you remove the dissonance tension. Again, you're going to believe that smoking is bad for your health, or you're going to believe that the research is inconclusive. So, you got two ways you're going to go. So, if smoking is bad for your health, what are you going to do common sense wise? You're going to quit smoking. But if you don't believe in the research, what are you going to do? You're still going to smoke. Why? Because you don't believe the research. Till later on, something happens to you and you are filled with lung cancer, then you're going to wish you had quit smoking. So, again, when it comes to cognitive dissonance, there's selective exposure. So rather than trying to reduce dissonance after it occurs, we may attempt to avoid dissonance through selective exposure. Why? Because people tend to selectively expose themselves to some information or experiences over others. Specifically, they would avoid dissonant messages and prefer consonant messages. Again, they would avoid dissonant messages and prefer consonant messages. Through selective exposure, however, people actively and selectively choose to view, hear, or read that which fits their current state of mind or beliefs. In other words, consumers select attitude consistent information and avoid attitude challenging information. This can be applied, going back to propaganda as well. That's why I did propaganda, to media, news, music, and other messaging channels. The idea is choosing something that is in opposition to how you feel or believe will render your cognitive dissonance. For example, a study was done in an elderly home in 1992 on the loneliest residents, those that did not have family or frequent visitors. Now, those that did not have visitors, here's what happened. The residents were shown a series of documentaries, 3 that featured a very happy, successful elderly person, and 3 that featured an unhappy, lonely elderly person. So basically, after watching the documentaries, the residents indicated they preferred the media featuring the unhappy, lonely person over the happy person. Now, let me stop there. This is what goes on in Black YouTube. This is true. Okay. Content like mine that's actually teaching you something, it's not going to get as many views as content where there's a lot of shouting and fighting. Why? Because in this space, a lot of Black people, they like the drama. Well, if you just listen to the experiment I told you about, the documentaries on the elderly people, you had one that featured a successful elderly person, and you had another that featured an unhappy elderly person. And when the documentaries were watched, the people chose the lonely person over the happy person. Why? Because this can be attested to them feeling lonely and experience cognitive dissonance. Watching somebody their age feeling happy and being successful. Then the study, now going back to that, you have some individuals that want to be part of something. because it makes them feel happy if they're part of something. They don't want to feel alone. So individuals, they will compromise their integrity to be part of something and for money. I've seen that here on YouTube. You don't believe me? Look at a number of brothers here who have watered down their content just to get money. Now, again, when it comes to the study, it explains how people select media that aligns with their mood, as in selectively exposing themselves to people and experiences they are already experiencing. So it is more comfortable to see a movie about a character that is similar to you than watch one about someone who is your age who is more successful than you. Okay. Some individuals don't want to see individuals more successful than them because that also causes what? Jealousy. So, can jealousy be a cognitive dissonance? Yes, it can. And here's how. You may have somebody that is hanging with you, and you might think they're your friend, but all along, they're really trying to hustle you, take you out, because they're jealous of your success because they don't have success. And when they don't have success, they want to eliminate you. They want to put you down because their life has come to a crossroads. Jealousy can be a form of cognitive dissonance. Now, another example to note is how people mostly consume media that aligns with their political views. Again, I just mentioned that. Fox News, Newsmax, CNN, MSNBC. Now, in a study done in 2015, participants were shown attitudinally consistent, challenging, or politically balanced online news. Results showed that the participants trusted attitude consistent news the most out of all the others, regardless of the source. It is evident that the participants actively selected media that aligns with their beliefs rather than opposing media. This is where you get what we call echo chambers. They align with people who have their views. See, opposing views cause conflict. Why do they cause conflict? Because number one, individuals don't know how to be rational. And when conflict is caused, you get emotions. You see that in YouTube. That's why I don't participate in debates here on YouTube, because individuals are very emotional. They want to resort to ad hominem attacks. And cognitive dissonance produces ad hominem attacks, especially when individuals don't have any conflict resolution skills or critical thinking skills. Now, in fact, recent research has suggested that while the discrepancy between cognitions drives individuals to crave attitude consistent information, the experience of negative emotion drives individuals to counter attitudinal information. Again, the experience of negative emotions drives individuals to avoid counter attitudinal information. In other words, it is the psychological discomfort that activates selective exposure as a dissonance reduction strategy. And again, we deal with cognitive dissonance. We're dealing with, say, contradiction, sign language, hypocrisy, jealousy. In other words, people will spend time and energy trying to keep everything, excuse me, trying to keep everything toward an echo chamber. Now, again, nothing wrong with having different views. And just because you have an opinion doesn't mean your opinion is right. You need opinions based on facts. Many of us have, when I say personal opinions, they're emotional opinions. They're based off of personal experience. So everybody's going to have different experiences. However, when you want to plug everything as a whole, you need fact-based opinions. That's how you get a solution. Echo chambers, groupthink doesn't always work. Yes, you can be an individual, but you have to understand that cognitive dissonance is everywhere. You also might have cognitive dissonance. So if you take time to look at this information that I have presented to you, you'll find that cognitive dissonance is on social media, it's in the political system, it's in your media, your religious institutions, and your education. Now, you don't have to believe me. What you have to do is seek it out for yourself. Now, the only way you're going to seek it out is if you understand the meaning of cognitive dissonance. And be advised, you have a number of individuals that will use information to try to justify their beliefs. I'll give you an example. You have people who go to church, who they try to interpret the scriptures, and most of them don't even read the scriptures, but they try to manipulate you by thinking they know the scriptures when they really don't know the scriptures. Even pastors out here. And you know, cognitive dissonance can also produce propaganda. And so if you're not sharp enough, you're going to believe anything. And sometimes you can have a set of beliefs, but if you weren't really informed about your set of beliefs and you've been riding on a set of beliefs for years, this is where the stubbornness is going to come in too. This is why your opinion can't be changed. Nothing wrong with your opinion being the same. However, you better realize that, yeah, you may have a belief, but there's new information coming about subjects every day. So what I'm going to tell you is this. If you really want to avoid cognitive dissonance, you got to be consistent. See, cognitive dissonance produces a lot of inconsistencies. This is why you can make holes in people's arguments. I've even made holes in my own argument. I said, well, wait a minute. I didn't know that happened. And sometimes people aren't aware of it. But until you understand cognitive dissonance, you're going to always have cognitive dissonance. Sometimes also deflecting. Okay. What about omission? If somebody's coming at you with something and you deflect, it's a straw man argument. Well, could a straw man argument be cognitive dissonance? Because you're coming with one view, but then you're deflecting on another view that has nothing to do with the one view that we're talking about. We'll get into that as well. But overall, when it comes to this cognitive dissonance, it's really based on your behavior. So you're not going to be able to change anything unless you change your behavior. And see, people who have cognitive dissonance, we call them stubborn. We call them delusional, hypocritical. Now, what I can tell you this is, there are going to be people that you will never be able to change their mind. And don't try to change their mind. Because what's going to happen, just like I told you about the dating situation, you're going to put in all your time, your energy, and get nothing back in return. But a bunch of sign language, shaming, insults, guilt, and need to be right. Because number of people who have, there's nothing wrong with having strong beliefs and convictions and morals. But you need to understand that there's other information outside your beliefs and morals. Now, some strong beliefs and morals like coming from a two-parent household or having a family that's stable, and a stable two-parent household where you don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs, and a strong family that actually wants to be there for each other, not there for the individual that's waiting for one parent to die to see what they're going to get in that will. Okay. But when you deal with cognitive dissonance, you must understand that always conflicting views coming at one another. And the only way to really change cognitive dissonance is to change your behavior. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some educational content, check out the QCIS channel, formerly the Mind of STEM channel. On that channel, I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, if you cannot find the 411 Talk Zone radio show, then before I go on, I'm also working on getting myself up there on Rumble as well. I will be putting some videos up there soon, and I'm going to bring back my blog talk radio show, and I will try to have a live next week. Again, the reason why I haven't done the lives is, okay, don't get a lot of audience participation because of the content I put out. And I'm going to give you some cognitive dissonance right here, especially in Black YouTube. When it comes to content that's really teaching you something, well, Black people don't want to watch that. They want to go over into the drama. Why? Because the drama makes them feel good. They don't want to deal with the truth when it comes to themselves because they have the cognitive dissonance. They like entertainment and laughter. And although life, you want to have some laughter, it's not laughter 24 hours a day. You got to be serious about life. But moving on, again, if you cannot find the 411 Talk Zone radio show or the QCIS channel on YouTube, you can check both of those channels out on my Twitter channel. Now, for the QCIS channel, since it's a professional and educational channel, you can check that channel out on my LinkedIn page. And in the end, be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. But if the shoe fits, wear it. If you don't like the shoe, change it. Again, I may have a live stream next week. I may not. Now, whatever happens, check in my community tab. But I want you all to share the videos that I post. I want you to like, share, and subscribe to the 411 Talk Zone radio show channel. And once again, that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. Right here on YouTube. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening and happy holidays to you all. Although I don't celebrate them, but for you all who do, wish you happy holidays and be safe and watch out for the weather. Because in some areas, because it's the first day of winter today, they're expecting some white stuff. Be good to each other. Again, I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious night. God bless you. I'm out.